Hello, good afternoon. Good afternoon, fellow IT security and compliance professionals. Welcome to my presentation about the NIST Cybersecurity Framework version 2.0. I am very excited to talk about the cybersecurity framework from the US government, and I want you to be excited as well. This means that our tax dollars are working for our cybersecurity. But kidding aside, this framework has a lot to offer to you, and you will look great when you learn this and adopt this in your organization. I know you have a lot of important things to do today, so I appreciate you being here with me. I promise to add value and provide you some actionable insights. Now, you're wondering what this has to do with the cybersecurity threats in 2024. Well, for starters, whenever the government comes up with something big, you better listen. Not only because your taxes paid for that important product, but also because the government presumably hired more experts and spent more quality time to come up with big and great tools such as the NIST Cybersecurity Framework version 2.0. Moreover, the previous version of this standard was released in 2018. The big upgrades to these standards are meant to counter the big threats in 2024. I'll talk more about this in the succeeding slides. Our objectives for today are to talk about the emerging threat landscape. AI tools are more accessible and easy to use. Computing power is cheaper than before. Phishing has become sophisticated. This means that malicious actors, whether state sponsored or commercial cybercriminals, have more tools to hold a company's digital assets hostage, penetrate an organization's network defenses, or spearfish an executive to steal millions of dollars. We will then see how the NIST Cybersecurity Framework version 2.0 can mitigate all of this and more. I have been in IT security, compliance, and data privacy for over 10 years in the gambling and hospitality industries in Las Vegas. Although my work experience is mostly in these industries, the knowledge and insights I learned have universal usefulness and can definitely be adopted in your own industry and company. I worked with various IT security frameworks through the years, such as ISO 27001, PCI DSS, COBIT 2019, OWASP, and many others. But definitely, NIST IT security frameworks, such as the NIST Cybersecurity Framework version 2.0, is a strong one when it comes to mitigating emerging threats in 2024. Now let's talk about the current and future cyber risk threats. For the past few years, ransomware has dominated the cybersecurity news. Hospitals, schools, governments, ports, and even major hospitality companies were hit hard by ransomware attacks. This criminal business model is very lucrative and is projected to cost its victims around the world by about $265 billion by year 2031. That is more than the gross domestic product of some European countries, such as Portugal, or South American countries, such as Peru. Hacktivism is another threat. The theft of US government files by a certain NSA contractor back in the middle of the previous decade will pale in comparison to what the hacktivists can do in the very near future, thanks to cheaper, more powerful, and readily available computing technologies. I'm sorry, but I'm in the middle of the desert, so I really get thirsty. But going back to our presentation, I have no crystal ball that can tell me what the future cybersecurity threat landscape looks like. So I decided to look into some reliable sources on the internet. The US Department of Homeland Security forecasts that cybercrime, critical infrastructure, and emerging technologies are key areas when it comes to cyber threats for 2024. Various forms of cybercrime, such as ransomware, distributed denial of service attacks, business email compromise, and many others, will be a considerable cost on the US economy. Attacks on the SCADA systems of power plants, gas companies, water companies, and similar utilities will be more prevalent. This is because domestic and foreign adversaries will try to cripple the US industries by targeting those key US infrastructure. And last and probably the most important of all, artificial intelligence or AI. Just like fire, AI can be a great servant or a terrible master. AI has lowered costs and improved productivity in businesses such as contact centers. But it can be used to create deep fakes for phishing campaigns or shorten the time to create deadly malware. Oh, I think we skipped a slide. Oh, no, we didn't. This article is straight out of Forbes magazine. And according to this magazine, the cost of cyber attacks on the global economy is projected to amount to 100 or $10.5 trillion by the end of 2024. The same publication highlighted the need for cybersecurity to be treated as a strategic priority on an individual, organizational, and governmental level. In the meantime, Forbes mentions that some of the big name trends we need to watch out for are generative AI, next level phishing attacks, and IoT or Internet of Things cyber attacks. Generative AI refers to models or algorithms that create or generate brand new output, such as text, photos, videos, code, or data. Like any tool made by humans, it can be used productively or destructively. Next level phishing attacks involves more sophisticated social engineering attacks that tricks users into giving attackers access to company systems and databases. The affordability and accessibility of generative AI has made it easier to mimic the identities and login credentials of targeted computer users within the organization. IoT devices or Internet of Things devices, especially with reference to home thermostats, security cameras, and other Internet connected devices, are improperly secured and are convenient gateway for attackers seeking to get into company systems. This is prevalent because with in the aftermath of COVID, remote work from home will be here to stay, and therefore the attack surface for these malicious actors is bigger than ever before. The Forbes article also mentions that because cybersecurity is a strategic priority, it will have greater visibility in the boardroom. It even predicts that eventually at least one member of the board will have cybersecurity expertise. This is similar to the board room changes in the early 2000s. In the aftermath of the financial frauds of several listed companies during that time, remember Enron, WorldCom, and so on, the SEC required that at least one of the board members have sufficient knowledge in accounting and financial internal control. This time, the important strategic imperative is cybersecurity, and hence, the people at the top, such as board members, should have a good knowledge of cybersecurity risks and mitigation strategies. Another important trend the article mentions is cyber resilience, or the capability of organizations to get back to serving its stakeholders as soon as it recovers from a cyber attack. This is a recognition of the reality that at some point, companies will be breached, data will be bricked up, and operations will ground to a halt. This is similar to the concept of hope for the best, but prepare for the worst. And finally, the authoritative CompTIA, or Computing Technology Industry Association, emphasizes that cybersecurity will drive a wide ranging series of decisions at the corporate level, and cyber risk management will be a key factor in those decisions. Like the two other sources we mentioned previously, it highlights the pervasive influence of AI, or artificial intelligence, in cybersecurity. As for risk management, the article points out that risk management will encompass both cybersecurity strategy and business operations. More on this trend in the next slide. A curious trend that CompTIA highlighted is the adoption of a risk management process to boost cybersecurity. Curiously, because companies of all sizes stated in the survey that they are using a formal risk framework. This is contrary to popular notion that smaller companies have at best an ad hoc risk management process. Hence, this is where the NIST Cybersecurity Framework version 2.0 comes in. It will be easier for companies to scale up its adoption of a new IT cybersecurity framework if they are already familiar or even using an existing one. Now, what is this NIST Cybersecurity Framework 2.0? It is but a framework made in response to heightened cybersecurity risks. Potential impacts to organizations from cybersecurity risks include higher costs, lower revenue, reputational damage, and the impairment of innovation. Cybersecurity risks also threaten individuals' privacy and access to essential service, and can even result in life or death consequences. This is true especially with the attack on Mercy One Hospital in Des Moines, Iowa, back in October of last year. The 3-year-old boy in that hospital was erroneously given an overdose of pain medication because the cyber attack on the hospital's computer system took down the digital tools that correctly administers the pain medicine. Fortunately, the boy survived. But this shows the urgency of mitigating cybersecurity risk and the importance of this framework in mitigating the cybersecurity risks in 2024. This framework provides guidance for reducing cyber risks by helping organizations to understand, assess, prioritize, and communicate about those risks and the actions that will reduce them. This framework does not prescribe how outcomes should be achieved. Rather, it maps the resources that provide additional guidance on practices and controls that could be used to achieve those outcomes. This means that this framework is not rigidly prescriptive. You have some leeway, but rather provides a clear and generous amount of guidance and also the expected outcomes that you need to achieve to meet the intent of this framework. The deadline for final feedback and comments on this draft will be within this week. It is not expected to materially change the substance and content of this framework, though comments will be incorporated in the final draft to be published in 2024, which is next year. This is just in time for the purpose of the summit, which is to understand and mitigate the cybersecurity threats in 2024. Meanwhile, let's dive deeper into this framework and learn how it can help us meet the cybersecurity threats and challenges of 2024. This framework is designed to be used by organizations of all sizes and sectors, including industry, government, academia, and nonprofit organizations. Moreover, the framework's taxonomy and reference standards, guidelines, and practices are not country specific, and previous versions of this framework has been successfully used by many governments and other organizations outside of this country. The primary audience for this framework consists of those responsible for developing and leading a cybersecurity program. It can also be used by others involved in managing risk, including C suite executives, members of the board of directors, IT professionals, risk managers, lawyers, HR specialists, IT compliance, and cybersecurity and risk management auditors to guide cybersecurity related decisions. Also, the framework can be useful to policyholders or policymakers, such as associations, professional organizations, and regulators, to set and communicate priorities for cybersecurity risk management. Unlike the previous versions, this version has a sixth function, which is governance. This satisfies the trends mentioned in the earlier slides, which is that cybersecurity will be part of overall corporate strategy. Strategy flows down from senior management and the board and circulates through all the other functions: identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. The cybersecurity framework functions as a wheel, as you can see in this diagram, because all framework functions relate to one another. For example, a company will categorize assets under identify and take steps to secure those assets under protect. Investments and testing in the govern and identify functions will support timely incident response and recover actions for cyber incidents in the respond and recovery functions. Govern is in the center of the wheel because it informs how an organization will implement the other five functions. We can say that they're bound by a unifying function, which is governance. Although all functions are equally important, the govern function is the bond that unifies the other five. The govern function is meant to establish and monitor the organization's cybersecurity risk management strategy, expectations, and policy. This function has six subfunctions or categories: organizational context, risk management strategy, cybersecurity supply chain management, roles, responsibilities, and authorities, policies, procedures, and processes and procedures, and oversight. We will go into deeper detail in the next slides. The first category under the govern function is organizational context. This refers to the 30,000 feet overview of the organization. It answers the question of what is the view from on high, what the organization should do to fulfill its mission, who and what are the stakeholders, and who we meet and how do we meet their expectations and what are the expectations. Whether it is an expectation of expanding market share, increasing gross profit margins, or increasing the number of homeless people fed if the organization is a nonprofit? What are the legal and regulatory requirements? If the organization is a bank, what banking laws should govern and limit our organizational behavior? If it's a bank, how will it meet Basel II, US Treasury laws, SEC regulations, and so on? It filters down into subcategories and expected outcomes. For instance, the organization mission is understood and informs cybersecurity risk management. Internal and external stakeholders are determined. It's management and people on the inside, regulators and third parties on the outside. Legal, regulatory, and contractual requirements regarding cybersecurity, including privacy and civil liberties obligations, are understood and managed. Critical objectives, capabilities, and services that stakeholders depend on or expect from the organization are determined and communicated. And outcomes, capabilities, and services that the organization depends on are determined and communicated. The next category is the risk management strategy. It goes down into subcategories and expected outcomes, such as risk management objectives are established and agreed to by organizational stakeholders. Risk appetite and risk tolerance statements are determined, communicated, and maintained. Enterprise risk management processes, including cybersecurity, risk management activities, are established and communicated. Lines of communication, this is very important because a lot of organizations are siloed, and so communication is not as good as it should be. Are established for cybersecurity risks, including risks from third parties and suppliers. A standard method for calculating, documenting, categorizing, and prioritizing cybersecurity risk is established and communicated. And strategic opportunities are identified and included in organizational cyber risk discussions. So, this is one thing, one important thing where you, of course, one of the main where you as IT security professionals can actively contribute in discussions with the corporate suite, senior management, and the board. The third category, cybersecurity supply chain risk management, talks about such things such as a cybersecurity supply chain risk management program, strategy, objectives, policies, and processes are established and agreed to by organizational stakeholders. So that's everyone from the top to IT to the people in the operations that translate those policies into concrete action as they fulfill the mission, vision, and objectives of the business. It also talks about cybersecurity roles and responsibilities for suppliers and partners are established and clearly communicated. A cybersecurity supply chain risk management is integrated into cybersecurity and enterprise risk management. And of course, suppliers are known and prioritized. And the risk posed by a supplier, their products and services are monitored over the course of a relationship. This is the reason why a lot of contracts always have the right to audit clause, or they have the obligation to show through an SOC report, or if they process credit card data, an Iraq report to show you that they are compliant with applicable security requirements and are at par with your security posture. Yeah, we went one slide up, so I have to move it back. But the other three categories are roles, policies, and oversight. So under the category roles, responsibilities, and authorities, outcomes are anywhere like organizational leadership is responsible and accountable for cyber risk. Roles and responsibilities regarding cybersecurity risk management are established, communicated, understood, and enforced. Adequate resources are allocated commensurate with cybersecurity risk strategy. This is, I think, is one of the problems with a lot of companies. They would say we are committed to be cyber secure, but then the board or senior management doesn't commit enough financial and human and professional resources to support their assertion. The policies, processes, and procedures category refers to organizational context, cybersecurity strategy, and priorities are communicated and enforced. I'm sure a lot of your companies have IT security policies, acceptable use policies, and so on. This is well and good, but again, the threats are not static. And so, if in your risk assessment you need to put in more policies, more procedures to respond to those threats, this category is a reflection of that. And oversight, of course, this is where we, as IT compliance professionals, come in. We are the trusted advisors of management, the board, but we are also a great resource for people in operations and in IT. So basically, this category means that cybersecurity risk management strategy outcomes are reviewed to inform and adjust strategy and direction. The threats are not static, and so your company's oversight should enable it to see what's in the horizon and respond appropriately. Okay, the next function, identify and protect. I'm sure you're all familiar with this asset management, risk assessment, improvements. So, asset management is identify is meant to help determine the current cyber security risk to the organization. It is divided into these categories. And let's move to the next slides for a deeper dive for this. So, under the identify section, the first category or asset management is exactly what it is, asset management. Subcategories under these categories or expected outcomes read something like inventories of hardware, software, services, and systems managed by the organization are maintained. Inventories of services provided by suppliers are maintained. Diagrams of authorized network communication and internal and external network data flows are maintained. In other words, to summarize this, it says you cannot protect what you don't know. Hence, you need to know what are your servers, what are your databases, where are they located, how are they protected, who manages them, Is it under, is it on-prem? Is it in your corporate cloud? Or is it in the premises of a third-party service provider? It also goes on to say assets are prioritized based on classification, criticality of resources, and impact on the mission. Of course, it also mentions systems, hardware, software, and services are managed throughout the life cycle. Under the risk assessment, you can see subcategories or expected outcomes, such as vulnerabilities in the assets are identified, validated, and recorded, or cyber threat intelligence is received from information sharing forms and sources. There is a reason why we communicate with peers or maintain constant contact with fellow professionals in our industry or in our location or in our professional association. It also mentions something like cyber threat intelligence is received from information sharing forums and sources. Internal and external threats are identified and recorded. Of course, you need to have a catalog of all your risks. Potential impacts and likelihoods of threats exploiting vulnerabilities are identified and recorded. Threats, vulnerabilities, likelihoods, and impacts are used to determine risk and inform risk prioritization. So, again, this is another reason why this framework is useful, especially to the board and the C suite, because it enables them to prioritize the risk on the digital crown jewels, the continuity of the business, and even the very survival of the organization, and of course the life and the livelihood of all the stakeholders. It also talks about changes and exceptions are managed, assessed for risk impact, recorded and tracked. It's like recording it, tracking it, and then that could serve as input in the next lessons learned session for your company. It also has this requirement that says the authenticity and integrity of hardware and software are assessed prior to acquisition and use. This goes back to the earlier categories on third parties. We need to be able to guarantee the that the risk from third parties, the people that run their systems that support your operations, the components and systems and applications that they use is within the risk tolerance of your assessment. And this is the reason why we need to have that clause where we could get in, do an audit, or ask them about any cybersecurity related issue should it come up. Under the improvement category, it mentions a something like security tests and exercises, including those done in coordination with suppliers and relevant third parties, are conducted to identify improvements. Lessons learned during execution of operational processes, again, we mentioned it earlier, lessons learned sessions, procedures and activities are used to identify improvements. And cybersecurity plans that affect operations are communicated, maintained, and improved. The protect function has several categories. Identity management, I'm sure you're familiar with the provisioning process in every company, authentication and access control, awareness and training, data security, very important because nowadays we are more sensitive when it comes not only to the privacy of financial or credit card data, but also our PII or PHI or protected health information, platform security, and technology infrastructure. The identity management, authentication, and access control reads something like this, like identities and credentials for authorized users, services, and hardware are managed by the organization, meaning there's no such thing as shadow IT. Everything has to be clearly visible. Everything has to be proactively managed. Identities are proved or proven and bound to credentials, meaning your identity is bound to the level of access that you have and the level of authorized access that your job requires you to do, and nothing more. Users, services, and hardware are authenticated. Of course, it's pretty obvious. Anyone who gets into the network has to be authenticated and authorized to the extent that his or her function requires it. It also mentions something like access permissions, entitlements, and authorizations are defined in a policy, managed, enforced, and reviewed, and incorporate the principles of least privilege and separation of duties. Again, this is a problem in a lot of companies when the developer for source code has access to production code. This is true in smaller organizations. So again, management has to come up with a proactive and realistic and feasible control that meets these requirements, but at the same time is suitable for the size of the IT department of that company. It also mentions physical access to assets is managed, monitored, and enforced commensurate to risk. The next category, aware and training, reads something like users are provided awareness and training so they possess the knowledge and skills to perform general tasks with security risks in mind. This is the reason why we have constant IT security awareness training and phishing campaigns. A lot of companies nowadays do simulated phishing campaigns, and they even have a red team, of course, hired from another company, to test their cybersecurity defenses. This category also states that individuals in specialized roles are provided awareness and training so they possess the knowledge and skills to perform relevant tasks. For example, IT people and also non IT people, maybe legal, HR, who are part of the incident response committee, should know what they need to do when there's a reported breach. Perhaps legal will draft a letter or a report to the government agencies and to third parties. HR will communicate with the employees who might be a culprit with the breach. Communications will send out a general communication to the employees and targeted also to certain stakeholders, maybe the C suite or the board, on what's going on. But nevertheless, this category calls for them to be aware of their responsibilities. The data security category is obviously about safeguarding data. It it discusses things like the CIA triad, the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of data at rest, in transit, and in process are protected. Data is managed throughout its life cycle from creation to destruction, and backups of data are created, protected, maintained, and tested. The platform security category talks about whether software is maintained, replaced, and removed, commensurate and removed, and the risk in that maintaining, replacing, and removing it is managed. Hardware is maintained, replaced, and removed, and log records are generated and made available for continuous monitoring. And of course, technology is, it refers to, because there are three components in any IT organization: the people, the process, and the technology. The technology is the enabler, but it's the people and the process that really makes it work. So it speaks on risk strategy with regards to applications, yes, databases, yes, but also with regards to the people that maintains it and makes it resilient. Oh, time flies. So we are now in the detect, respond, and recover functions. And let's talk in greater detail about this. Detect is basically can be summed up as, for example, a detection of an IOC or indicators of compromise. Respond is you had an IOC, what's your incident response plan? And recover is how do you get up if, in case you're a victim of ransomware, your systems were taken offline, and you need to be able to serve the needs of your customers right away. So let's go on to the next slides for greater detail. So this basically contains continuous monitoring. Continuous monitoring is maintaining logs, making sure that their integrity is guaranteed, but at the same time going through those using a security incident and event management. Adverse event analysis. It refers to whether cyber threat intelligence and other contextual information are integrated into the analysis, because it's not enough that you identify an event, but is it material? Is it a major risk, or it's just there's a difference between an incident and an event. So whether it's something that's serious, that's what the category addresses. Then we move on to this category under, I think this is under respond. Let me, incident management. So, incident management reads something like the incident response plan is executed once an incident is declared. Incident reports are triaged and incidents are escalated as needed. Then you have incident analysis, incident response, and incident mitigation. So, analysis is doing a root cause analysis or any other form of analysis to determine what caused that incident and how to mitigate it in the future. Incident data and metadata is collected as well and analyzed. Incident response and incident mitigation is basically how do we notify the stakeholders and how do we eradicate this particular incident. Then you have incident recovery and communication, which is basically putting in place your uh, business continuity plans, disaster recovery plans, meeting the time frame to get back to doing business as normal and fulfilling the mission of the organization. Okay, now we have this nice diagram or nice illustration. So think of your company or organization as that building in the middle of the circle. The green circle is the wall of protection that the NIST Cybersecurity Framework version 2.0 provides your company or organization. But the wall is not a static wall of protection. You can maximize the utilization of this wall. How? By these five arrows pointing in the diagram, or five arrow points in the diagram. Let's move on to the next slide to talk about those in greater detail. So, enterprise-wide guide for assessing cybersecurity risk. This framework touches all relevant aspects of your company's cybersecurity risk areas, which is divided into people, process, and technology. People would be anyone from your remote work from home employees, decision makers, key executives, IT professionals, legal, HR, accounting, even factory workers with access to computer systems. Process would be the set of policies and procedures that guide each and every aspect of your company's operations. For instance, if you are a hotel, back of house, purchasing, warehousing, IT support, front of house, front desk manager, marketing staff, concierge, and hotel managers. Technology would be anything that you use to meet business objectives, point of sale systems, payment card machines, various applications that process, store, and transmit customer financial and personal data, network and system components, even the SCADA that runs your various industrial equipments if you are into manufacturing or utilities. However, as the saying goes, you are only as strong as your weakest link. But nevertheless, the framework is a good guide for sorting out and prioritizing your so called digital crown jewels, which needs maximum protection from cybersecurity threats. It's a starting point for board and C-suite cybersecurity risk planning. As pointed out earlier in the trends by Forbes, CompTIA, and Department of Homeland Security, cybersecurity will be a vital component of corporate strategy. So, for those of you who had a hard time convincing the powers that be in your organization, now is a good time to do so. Even better, this goes just beyond planning to protect your company from cyber risk. So, this one says all bases are covered at the operational level. The framework is not only all encompassing, but is readily understandable and digestible. After all, an IT cybersecurity framework is best implemented if it is understood. The framework provides a common language to support a common cause, which is protecting the company's assets from cyber threats. This enables you to leverage all relevant resilience measures and heighten vigilance rather than foster cybersecurity complacency. I observe that a lot of companies are complacent because they have an IDS, they have an IPS, they have multiple layers of protection. But in reality, the threat environment, the malicious actors are always clever. They're trying to get in. It takes only one try for them to be successful. For the company, you need to be proactive and vigilant every day. So there's no room for complacency. And governance is the thread that binds all these functions. So it's important for Tone at the top to support all your cybersecurity initiatives. For instance, adapting this IT or NIST cybersecurity framework into your organization. So takeaways are: read the framework, see how it lines up with your risks, get the board to approve the measures that you recommend, but at the same time, plan for the worst. Because if they become successful, then you have to put in place your cyber resilience measures so you could get back on your feet right away. And this is where I'd like to thank Bright Talk, Tech Target, Stephanie, Alicia, our sponsors, and most important of all, you, our audience, for supporting Bright Talk, for listening to my presentation. And I hope I was able to make your hour with me worthwhile, and I'm able to contribute value to what you do in your organization. And yes, you can see that's my email address. So if you have other questions, just email me, and I'll be happy to answer your questions and help you with regards to NIST Cybersecurity Framework version 2.0. So thank you very much. Thank you uh, to Bright Talk, to Tech Target, and I look forward to sharing my insights with all of you, my beloved audience, in the near future. So I'm sorry we're going a little over time, but have a great afternoon and enjoy the rest of the summit.